Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. We've got another exciting episode today talking about the fantasy overview of the Minnesota Wild for the upcoming season. Now before we start guys, please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment. I'd really appreciate it, and it would really help me grow this channel. Alright, so let's jump right into it. Now on the day of this recording, Minnesota released their very first practice lines. And they're a little bit ridiculous. Let's jump right into them and I'll tell you why I don't think those lines are going to stick. Their first line, Zach Parise, Nick Bjugstad, and Kirill Kaprizov. Second line, Marcus Johansson, Nick Bonino, and Kevin Fiala. Now, these lines are ridiculous for a couple of reasons. For one, Bjugstad is not a first-line center. He's not even a second-line center. He's at best a third-line center, and I'm really hoping that he's just a filler until Marco Rossi comes to camp and hopefully impresses everybody, because if that's going to be their first line, Minnesota is not going to be looking too good this year. Bonino is kind of the same thing. He's more of a third-line center than a second-line center, but Minnesota is just so weak at that position that if he ends up being their second-line center, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Now that we've gone through Minnesota's initial practice lines, I want to go through the lines that I actually think they're going to be using. My projected lines for the Minnesota Wild are Kaprizov, Rossi, and Fiala on the top line, Parise, Johansson, and Zuccarello when healthy on the second line, or Greenway when Zuccarello is unhealthy, and Eriksson, Bonino, and Bjugstad on that third line. On that top power play, it should be Kaprizov, Rossi, Fiala, Parise, and Matt Dumba. On that second power play, it's Johansson, Eriksson, Zuccarello, Suter, and Spurgeon. And honestly, all three of the defensemen listed here, Suter, Dumba, and Spurgeon, are pretty much interchangeable and they could all play at any spot on either power play. Alright guys, so let's jump right into our do not draft list, and first on that list is Zach Parise. The reason for this is Zach Parise is getting a little bit old. He's not as good as he used to be. He used to be a top 10 player in the NHL every single year, and he's not that anymore. Last season, he actually had 46 points in 69 games, which is actually pretty decent. But with the emergence of Fiala and Kaprizov probably playing with Fiala, I don't really see Parise getting as big of a role this year. Yes, I do still see him on that top power play, so he still has some fantasy value, but I just don't see his role being as big this year. However, if he does end up playing alongside Fiala or even Kaprizov, then I might reconsider my stance on Parise. Alright, so next on my do not draft list, currently ranked at 280, is Mats Zuccarello, and Zuccarello is a great player. I like him, but the thing is he recently underwent surgery on his right arm. That happened in November, and they've already announced that he won't be there for the start of training camp, but they haven't really announced anything else. To me, I don't think he's going to be ready for even the first month or two of the season, because surgeries are something that you have to take your time healing from, right? You can't just jump right back into game shape, and it's only been a couple months. I think he maybe returns in February, but again, I'm no doctor. I don't know how long it's going to take, and that's why I won't draft Zuccarello, because he's not that amazing of a player that you have to stash him on IR to keep him when he comes back. He's going to be so good. No, he's not. He's going to be decent when he comes back. So for that reason, don't bother drafting Zuccarello. Alright guys, so next on the do not draft list is Marcus Johansson, currently ranked at 327. He's got dual eligibility as both a center and a left winger, and last year he had 30 points in 60 games. Now, to a lot of people, Marcus Johansson seems a pretty intriguing option as a late round steal. Minnesota has absolutely no centers this year, and he's primed to maybe play top line center. If he does, by all means you can take a shot on him. He might have a half decent season. But if he plays anywhere else, second line, third line center, I don't really like Marcus Johansson. I honestly think that Marco Rossi will make the team. He's one of the most NHL-ready prospects from the draft that just happened, and I think he'll be that top line center. If that happens, I don't really see too much value for Marcus Johansson, and I'd rather stay away from him. Alright guys, so that's it for our do not draft list. Let's now jump right into our draft list. And first on that draft list, guys, is Kevin Fiala. Kevin Fiala finally had that breakout season we've all been waiting for. He scored 54 points in 64 games and looked like a stud. He looked like an elite player in the league. And this year, if he plays with Kaprizov, he might just look even better because Fiala will actually have some decent players to play with on his line. So if that is the case, watch out, Kevin Fiala could be a real steal this year. So next on this list, guys, is Kirill Kaprizov, and he was drafted 135th overall in 2015, almost 6 years ago. He's been playing in Russia ever since, and he has been absolutely dominating the Russian leagues. He has been compared with guys like Panarin, Kuznetsov, Tarasenko. This guy is just so talented, and he's absolutely crushed in the KHL over the last couple of seasons. I fully expect him to come to Minnesota, make the lineup right away, and make that top line right away, just because Minnesota's offense is just so weak. And even though Coach Dean Evison said that he'd prefer that both Kaprizov and Fiala play on different lines to get two good lines going, I highly doubt that's going to happen, just because Minnesota doesn't have the really good players to do that. They're much better off having one really hot top line and a second line that's pretty good, rather than have just like this talent spread out. That's why I really like drafting Kaprizov at 158 this year. I think it could be an absolute steal. Next on my draft list, guys, is Ryan Suter. And this guy is an ageless wonder. He just gets better every season somehow, and he's just getting older and older. The guy's turning 36 this month, and yet he managed 48 points in 69 games last year. He's going to keep getting consistent power play time, and he's going to consistently be on the ice a ridiculous amount. And for that reason, at 194, Suter is a really safe draft pick. Now moving along to another defenseman on Minnesota, Matt Dumba. Last year he had a really rough season points-wise. He had only 24 points in 69 games. And yeah, Dumba's usually considered the best out of the three Minnesota defensemen, but last year's numbers are pretty worrisome. Luckily, he still hit and blocked a decent amount, so it didn't completely remove his fantasy value, but Dumba was really not good last year. I think it's absolutely possible that he bounces right back, because the kid is just so talented, and there shouldn't be any reason that he had a season as bad as he did last year. However, it's obviously riskier, right? It could happen again. If it does, that's a pretty wasted pick at 200. I'd much rather grab Suter, who's going just 6 picks before him, or even Spurgeon, who's much safer, going 55 picks after him. But honestly, taking a chance on Dumba isn't the worst idea in the world. This is a guy who's hit 50 points in a full 82-game season before. If you're a Dumba believer, and you really think he's going to bounce back this year, go ahead and draft him, because he could really do some damage if he bounces back. Next on my draft list, guys, is my must draft of the video, Cam Talbot, currently ranked at 223 overall in Yahoo Drafts. This means he's usually not drafted in shallower leagues. That's pretty good. Now, a lot of people assumed when Cam Talbot was acquired that he'd be splitting the starts with Alex Stalock. That was probably the plan, but the thing is, Stalock is injured right now, and we're not even sure if he's going to even come back this entire season. So because of that, Cam Talbot has gained a lot of fantasy value and should get the vast majority of the starts on Minnesota. And you might think, well, Minnesota's not the greatest team, they won't get that many wins. Actually, they're kind of improved this year offensively with the addition of Kaprizov and Marco Rossi, and also they're in a really weak division. They've got Anaheim, LA, and San Jose, and Arizona in their division. That's a lot of games played against pretty weak teams. Minnesota should be able to rack up quite a few wins this season, and Cam Talbot is actually going to be pretty valuable. So the only thing that's a little bit worrisome is the emergence of rookie Kaapo Kähkönen. He looked pretty good in the few starts he got last season, but I don't think it's too much of a worry. I don't see him taking over the starter's job. I do think Talbot's going to get the vast majority of the starts this year. And last but not least on my draft list, guys, it's Jared Spurgeon, currently ranked at 255. He had 32 points last year, which is pretty decent. He'll probably end up with, the same amount, 32, 34 points in the 56-game season. And he's going to block a lot of shots as well. Last year, he blocked over 100 shots, so he's pretty valuable in that category as well. Jared Spurgeon is honestly a really safe pick at 255 if you still need a defenseman. All right, guys. So now that we're done with our draft list, let's jump into our keep your eye out for list. So first on this list, guys, is goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen. And no, I don't necessarily recommend drafting Kähkönen, but I think we should keep an eye out for him in the first couple of weeks of the season, see how many starts he's actually gonna get. If he ends up starting close to 40% of the games, then he might be worth a look. If he starts playing better than Talbot, he's definitely worth a grab considering the bad teams that Minnesota plays this year in their schedule. Now next on my keep your eye out for list, guys, is Nick Bjugstad. And if they end up keeping him on that top line with Kaprizov and Parise, Bjugstad might actually have some fantasy value, which nobody expected this year. Let's just keep an eye out for that. I honestly think Marco Rossi will take that spot, but let's just keep an eye out for it. Next on this list is Nick Bonino, and him too, if he ends up keeping that spot on the second line next to Kevin Fiala, Bonino may actually have some fantasy value. Bonino's not a bad player by any means, but I mean, obviously he's locked in at center and there are a lot better natural centers than him, but Bonino would make an excellent streamer in weeks that Minnesota has a favorable matchup. So next on this list, guys, is Marco Rossi, and I honestly think he's going to make the team, and I honestly think he's going to play on that top line. If he does, guys, you absolutely have to scoop him up off the free agency, off the waiver wire, add him to your team, because he's going to have some massive value. We have to keep an eye out for that, obviously, and I'll definitely send out a tweet if that does end up happening. Obviously, if he doesn't make the team, you're not adding him to your team. Alright guys, so you've reached the end of the YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I really appreciate the support. Please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment. Let me know how I can improve these videos. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.